In the last video about giants, I promised a more complete video on this topic, but before I start, I want to make a small preface to the last video. In particular, I made a mistake and took the wrong diameter initially, and as a result, the volume and weight of the columns in the Temple of Jupiter. As a result, the total weight of the column comes out less, but this is not so critical, and does not affect the analysis of the topic about the possibility of such a construction method that officials impose on us. On average, the lower section comes out about 100 tons, the next about 80, and the upper part about 60. This does not cancel all the difficulties, and the installations explain why these columns need to be raised. Suppose they rolled the first section along the embankment. What to do with the rest? 10 to 15 people will fit right next to the column. Even if you have thousands of slaves, you still won't use them all, since the height of one section is about 6.8 meters, and in the prone position, how many people will you place with levers behind the column? On average, the load for one person will be about 6.8 tons, and even up the slope, if there is an embankment, then at the top it needs to be raised without lowering, taking into account all the mistakes and the human factor. How many slaves will pass before they install dozens of columns? Build scaffolding and lift with ropes. For comparison, the weight of the T-90 tank is 46 tons, that is, the weight of almost 2 tanks had to be lifted to the second tier. It was a little less than 1.5 tanks, and this is only one detail. What size these scaffolding had to be in order to fit enough people on them to lift this? Well, okay, let's leave this question for the officials to think about. In general, friends, of course, I may have some reservations or shortcomings in the video, and they will definitely be, and more than once, because I am a person and it's natural for a person to make mistakes. I don't have a big team that would help me in preparing the material. I do everything myself, so I may be wrong in some numbers, but I have you, so if I made a mistake or a slip in something, correct me in the comments, because one head is good, but 10 is better. To begin with, let's try to find out how people of such huge stature could exist on Earth at all, and could they exist at all? After all, nowadays everyone who is above 2 meters is mostly disabled. Many also write that their skeleton would collapse from atmospheric pressure and gravity, but for some reason no one remembers about dinosaurs. But still, let's try to find the answer to this important question, as well as in what conditions you were Earth, for example, 2,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago. In the modern world, too, sometimes people are born not quite the usual size for us, but usually they all have health problems, but this was not always the case. This is Miss Obama. Her height was 2 meters 32 centimeters. She was born in 1862 and was known as an Amazon and a giantess from Africa, and this is a giant from China in 1871. His height is 2 meters 44 centimeters. Amalia should be her height 2 meters 19 centimeters. She had a perfectly formed figure and in normal proportions. Unlike modern giants, she was also very beautiful, and her husband Martin Bates, about 2.5 meters tall, was also of normal proportions, a man only of large sizes. They even had attempts to have children, but before they were born, they died within a few hours. The largest was the son. He was born weighing about 10 kilograms and 76 centimeters long. Ivan Markov of the gigantic Russia of the early 20th century. His height was 2 meters 37 centimeters. Another Russian giant, Fyodor Makhnov, his height is 2 meters and 39 inches. The museum also has a huge pistol, clearly not corresponding to the size of modern people. Scientists tell us that this is a rifle for duck hunting, but paying attention to the huge hook, and for example, we understand that it is very convenient to shoot this pistol, and the trigger must be coordinated with all the force and strength to pull yourself out, which will inevitably entail a violation of the initial position of the sight and, as a result, miss, as it is clearly visible that the weapon had a butt, but was later cut down. Museum's huge swords that it was also clearly not created for a modern man. Historians claim that this is a two-handed sword. Well, as you know, in a real fight, the use of such a large sword would be any warrior with an ordinary sword could cope with a desperate kamikaze with a huge useless colossus in his hands, unless the warrior who carried this weapon, of course, was four. However, there is also historical evidence that the Prussian king Friedrich Wilhelm I gathered an army of giants. He collected them all over the world. For prints you can calculate the approximate height of these giants, taking into account the increase in the average person of about 160,170 centimeters. In the end, it is obvious that the growth of the giants was about 2.5 to 3 meters. Even 200 to 300 years ago, the people of the big growth has been ordinary, and felt quite normal, and even can fight, cannot be said about the modern giants, according to many climate scientists, and atmospheric pressure, gravity, etc. On the land used were different, for many centuries, is a favorable environment for the giants gradually worsened as a result of all species on Earth became smaller. It is clear that, for example, huge redwoods in the USA when the colonialists began to land that faced the extraordinary size of the trees, began widespread deforestation, and the giant stumps some immigrants even used as a shelter of the trees lasted until the beginning of the 20th century, have not yet been fully excavated, and also in Egypt, there are many reasons to say that among them were people. Just a huge growth, and it felt good, as here, they are depicted as the size of a giraffe, as you can see here the attitude of the common man and giant. In fact, many of the Egyptian legends tell that giants built the pyramids, not as we are told by scientists, thousands of ordinary slaves. And also confirm that the wall paintings in the pyramids themselves, by the way, all the walls are painted with figures of men giant growth, but Egyptologists prefer to keep quiet about it and continue to develop the theme of the logs according to the blocks in preparation of embankment with rope, heavy blocks. People of gigantic stature existed on Earth until the beginning of the 20th century, and some are born to this day, and this is not a mistake of nature, but the memory stored in the genes of each of us. Just sometimes this memory makes itself felt and people of great stature are born, but we are constantly confronted with evidence of the existence of a race of giants, and not its individual representatives who lived among people. And so when did this race of giants live? Let's start with other representatives of the inhabitants of our planet, gigantic in size. As you probably already guessed, we are talking about dinosaurs. We used to think with you that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago due to the fall of a huge meteorite, but why not 125 million or maybe 525 million? Or not from a meteorite, but from the plague or cholera? Really? First of all, you should not trust scientists. Their method of determining age is categorically not worth it. They are wrong in 99% of cases, and in one of the individual issues I will prove it to you. Now let's turn to ancient texts. For example, dinosaurs are also mentioned in the Bible. The word dinosaur itself is certainly not in it. It was invented by Richard Bowen, and appeared only in 1841. In general, the Bible says that land lizards appeared on the sixth day of creation, at the same time as man, but water lizards were created the day before, along with all waterfowl reptiles. Here is a hippopotamus that I created like you. He eats grass like a bull. turns his tail like a cedar from the strength in his loins and abdominal muscles. The veins on his thighs are intertwined. His legs are like copper pipes. His bones are like iron rods. This is the top of the ways of God. Only the one who created him can bring your sword closer to him. The words behemoth, of course, as you understand, have already been translated by modern people. Twirls its tail like a cedar. Let's look at the tail of a behemoth. Cedar clearly does not smell here. In general, this description of the king of beasts is called the top of the ways of God. I think behemoth is not very similar to the king of beasts, and his creation is clearly not. It's called a top. Then who is it according to the description? It is most like a diplodocus. It is also written that this sea is large and spacious. There are countless reptiles, small animals with large ones swim there. There are ships, Leviathan, which you created to play in it. There is no one like him on earth. He was created fearless, huge size, strong jaws, large teeth, the ability to move quickly underwater. Who is Leviathan? Could it be a whale? It was one of the most grandiose sea creatures that ever existed on Earth. It was something resembling a reptile, with huge sharp teeth. According to the description, it looks more like a plesiosaur. In general, there is every reason to believe that these animals lived up to the time of King David, since it was he who wrote the psalm, in which also Leviathan is mentioned. This 1562 painting depicting soul suicide. What kind of animals do these people ride? Camels. Here's what camels look like. For comparison, they clearly look more like diplodocus, but where did they come from in a 16th century painting? How could the artist even know about the existence of such animals? And even draw with such precision? And these are fossilized dinosaur and human footprints in Texas, dinosaur and human footprints in Arizona, Uzbekistan, Kugitau Mountains. Human footprints differ from normal sizes. There are also dinosaur footprints nearby. You will never hear about it from scientists or from TV channels. This will be the last nail in the coffin of the theory of evolution, and this the ancient temple, which is located in Cambodia. This structure is also very remarkable and deserves special attention, but this is not what we are interested in now. Its bas-relief depicts animals that inhabited this area at that time, and among them we see such an unusual animal. Who is it? There is no animal like him on Earth right now, but if I tell you that this animal is very similar to a stegosaurus, and it looks 100%, how could ancient people depict a stegosaurus with such accuracy? If he's never been seen. Or did you see it? Naturally, if there was a race of giants, then the animals had to be large, everything had to be big, mountains, trees, and so on. By the way, there is no mention of the ocean in any ancient source. I am not referring to medieval sources now, but more ancient ones. For example, if you take the same Bible, it says that there were only seas. All rivers flow into the sea, but there are no overflowing seas. They return to the place from where they flow rivers to flow again. So where did the ocean come from? In the sacred sources on this occasion it is written that at that time there was a lot of water in the sky. It was a kind of protective film from solar radiation and so on. The Earth at that time was something like a greenhouse, respectively. The oxygen content in the atmosphere was 100%, providing a healthy metabolism and low carbon dioxide content, everything on the planet up to a certain point. Apparently, before the first catastrophe was simply gigantic, the pressure had to be large at the same time. This is confirmed by measurement the pressure in the air bubbles in amber, which showed a pressure of 8 atmospheres, and the oxygen content is 38%. Now its content in the atmosphere is only 21%. This explains how giant reptiles could rise into the air without the slightest plumage. with such a density of the atmosphere, any animal with at least some wings it would be easy to get into the air. From all this it can be assumed that part of the water now in the world's oceans was in the atmosphere in the form of a protective dome, later for some reason it disappeared. Everything sank to the bottom. Of course, this is confirmed in the legends of all the peoples of the world, as well as in all ancient sources about the flood. But back to the race of giants, in Islam, for example, they are described in great detail, including size. In the source of Sheikh Said Effendi's book The History of the Prophets it is written that the shortest of them was 60 cubits tall, and they reached maturity only after 100 years. 60 cubits is about 30 meters tall, but this is not the highest height at that time. They were led by a tyrant named Jolly Jan Tall at 100 cubits, that is, about 50 meters. It was the largest and oppressed ordinary people. All the scriptures say that giants lived in parallel with humans and even descended from humans. They also say that giants died only once every 100 years, and they lived for thousands of years. The race of giants undoubtedly existed, and there are tens of thousands of proofs of this. They are simply not subject to wide publicity. People at that time lived together with dinosaurs, and they did not die from a meteorite, but most likely from a flood that still happened in ancient times. By the way, this is also proved by archaeological finds of dinosaur skeletons. Most of them were found in groups, and mostly with broken neck vertebrae and bones, but not all of them gathered in one place and committed suicide, and the fossils themselves indicate that they appeared due to an abundant outpouring of bones with water. Under no other conditions will the bones turn into stone. On this occasion I will make a separate issue very soon. In general, as it turned out, it's impossible to fit everything into one short issue, and I really don't want to stretch it for an hour and take up too much of your time. Therefore, I decided to make sure that in future releases you will learn something new for yourself about the race of giants, which in the future will form a complete picture in your head, so do not miss new releases. If you like the issue, subscribe to the channel and leave comments. See you again.